Welcome to this HRD podcast. We are joined today by Richard Doherty from Workday. Thank you for joining us today, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
Industry commentators, including Josh Bersin, have talked of a shift away from traditional talent management to more people-focused initiatives. What does this mean for talent programs in the future?
Well, it's interesting, and we're seeing a major shift in organisations and how they view talent management. Talent management is still important and necessary, but it has traditionally quite a narrow focus. Perhaps handling high potentials, top execs. Whereas while that's still important, we feel that there's a broader movement to enabling the entire workforce. No one gets left behind. Enable every employee to explore, discover, and create their own career options. Take control of their own careers. While talent management was more about automating process, really, which didn't deliver that much value to each individual employee. So yes, there's a definite shift from management to enablement.
What role does technology play in driving better employee engagement and enablement?
Well, if we think of HR technology, and every listener to this podcast will have what we call a HR system of record, right? And those HR systems of record are incredibly important from an engagement perspective because they hold so much data about every employee. Things like when were they hired, when did they change job, when did their manager change, when did their pay change, what are their career interests, and so on. And all of that data, and we're getting more and more of that data, is key to providing that sort of personal and engaging experience that you really need if you want to transform your system of record to become this system of engagement. And if I can take an example sort of from the consumer world, if we think about Netflix, imagine if Netflix didn't really track your transactions, i.e. what kind of films are you watching, it wasn't tracking what other people were watching, so it didn't have all that sort of transactional data about how you interacted with their system. So if it didn't have that information, it wouldn't be able to kind of make intelligent recommendations about other films that you might be interested in watching. And I don't know about you, but I find a lot of those kind of recommendations open up a whole new world of film that I hadn't even thought I would enjoy. So if you were to for Netflix separate effectively their system of record from the system of engagement, the whole experience would be nowhere near as good as it is today. And it's the same for HR systems. We have all this data about the employees, but if our system of engagement, the system where the employees get to manage their careers and so on, are separated from the system of record, then we can't really start making the meaningful career recommendations to the employee, for instance, because we don't have access to that transactional data. We're also not able, for instance, to help managers be better managers by perhaps highlighting employees who are at risk of leaving, and then not just leaving them there, because if we have access to all that transactional data about people in our organisation, we could then potentially make recommendations in terms of the actions that manager might want to take to return that employee. So technology has a key role to play in driving more employee engagement or better employee engagement and enablement, but it's all about this sort of separation between the system of record and the system of engagement that we're particularly interested in at the moment.
To better understand their talent, HR leaders often deal with different talent management in a silo, including utilising separate technology tools. Can you tell us about that disconnect and why this might not be the perfect approach?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and I think to answer it, I need to go a little bit. We need to understand the history of HR systems to a certain extent, and the great majority of sort of HR systems that organisations are using today were probably developed in the late 1990s or early 2000s. They were really very much designed for capturing data. They were on-premise applications that were, not particularly flexible and certainly not built for the change and disruption that all of our businesses are susceptible to today. So they're not very agile systems. So as talent management, for instance, became more and more popular, more of a strategy for the majority of organisations, they quickly realised that those core system of record systems that they had in place already didn't offer the kind of flexibility and functionality that they needed to manage talent. So, quite naturally, some organisations sort of adopted or went out and kind of acquired niche applications to fill those holes, and that made a lot of sense because there really was no alternative at that time. Now, problem was that that's resulted in, sort of from a user perspective, managers, employees, and HR having to access sort of multiple different systems to manage different processes, so different user experiences, different ways of doing things. And as we've moved to a more sort of mobile app sort of delivery model for HR applications, if you have that sort of hodgepodge of different application architecture that I've just described, then that means the employees have to have multiple apps, which is also a bit of an inhibitor to people to actually use the system. And then also you have your data spread across different silos. It becomes quite difficult to connect those different systems. And basically it ends up that your sort of processes aren't in real time because you're having to synchronize the data between those different systems. So it's not ideal. Now, we still see some organizations taking that sort of niche approach. We need to solve performance management, so we're going to acquire a performance management system and bolt it onto our existing HR systems. Now, while that may sort of tick the box in terms of, performance management was our issue and we've got a system and that will automate that process, it doesn't necessarily actually drive the positive business outcomes that most organizations want from that kind of investment. And the other issue with this sort of, best of breed approach, is you have this disconnect across different processes. So for instance, with Workday, which is a single system covering all of these processes, starting from when you initially start to attract talent to your organization via talent acquisition, you hire them, you then onboard them in a smooth way, you provide them with just-in-time learning, you start surveying them every so often with pulse surveys just to get their feedback on how things are going. And that's all in one system. And then over time, as they grow and develop within your organisation and change roles and have performance reviews and so on, you're able to start measuring the quality of hire. For instance, people that we've hired from certain sources or with certain profiles, how well have they performed, and that will shape perhaps future sourcing strategies. And you're only able to do that kind of thing because all of those processes are managed in one system and all the data is in one system. So, that kind of analysis, which is really exciting, is just simply not possible if you've got this sort of multiple systems managing different processes within HR.
What does the alternative look like, and how can HR go about placing talent management at the core?
If talent management, is so important, and talent enablement is so important, I suppose we have to ask our question, why do some organisations, build and deliver it in isolation? It kind of makes no sense if it's such an important thing to do. It should be at the core of our HR systems. And, it's almost like we need to make talent management something that touches everyone, not just an exclusive part of the employee population. It really needs to touch everyone. And how do we do that? It's by making the whole experience of interacting with the HR applications personalised, engaging and empowering, so that those tools that we provide the workforce, help them get their jobs done more effectively, help them manage their careers, help them maximise, their potential. And as employees grow within our company and take on new roles and develop new skills and so on, the system needs to know that about me, because then the system needs to adapt to better, so that it continues to be relevant for me as an employee. If the system looks exactly the same to me from my first day to my fifth year anniversary, then that system is clearly not personalised, and it's going to become less and less relevant to me as I progress within the organisation. So for instance, when I onboard The system knows that I don't really know anyone, so it should be suggesting connections, people I should connect with within the organisation. I should have a personalised message from my manager. It should be pushing learning that will help accelerate my road to productivity. So you have that beautiful, smooth onboarding, personalised experience. But then 18 months down the road, say, when perhaps I've been performing well, and I'm almost certainly going to be ready to perhaps change, take on more responsibility, and the system needs to be able to recognise that and engage with me and provide me with options to help me explore the career opportunities that there might be within the organisation. And again, a lot of that can be data-driven by using that transactional information that we have in the HR system of record. And by making the HR system, personally engaging, it'll keep those employees, coming back for more, because they'll see the value in the system. They know that the system is personalised for them, so it continues to be relevant. So just ultimately just draw them back in. The majority of HR systems, people just use them from an employee and manager perspective. They only use them when they really have to. We want to change that dynamic so that people want to use the system because they're getting value from it and they find the system engaging and empowering.
What does the perfect future model look like with talent at the core?
We're already starting to see many organisations moving from this system of record to what we're talking about, which were just sort of data capture tools, systems you use just because you had to this system of engagement that I'm talking about, systems that you want to use because they are adding value to your daily working life. And that's reflected in, much higher adoption rates of systems, much higher levels of satisfaction with the HR systems. And how do you do that? Well, again, it's about bringing together, leveraging all those transactions in the system of record so you can understand your workforce and your individual employees. But it's also about leveraging, rich interactive content, things like, high definition video for learning, for instance. We need to be leveraging the latest technologies, the kind of technologies we use in our home life. But those technologies clearly need to be brought into the enterprise space. And the other thing is, to move to this system of engagement, I think, organisations need to look at these these projects as being, quite large, large programs. You need to have multi-year plans for these to move to the system of engagement. And really, it's time to stop bolting on solutions, as I described earlier in our conversation, because that's really got a very short-term focus. It's about, sort of ticking the box. Yes, we've got a succession planning system in place. Whereas the reality is, in the longer term, by bolting all these systems together, it's really preventing HR from delivering the ultimate value to the business, because the systems won't be engaging for all the reasons I've said, different user experiences, different apps for different processes. So the usage typically isn't that great. Not that many people, they'll only use the systems when they have to, which means you have less data than perhaps you could do if you had that single system that people wanted to use. And if you have less data, then ultimately that means you're able to deliver less insight to executives and business leaders, which really helps HR drive those positive outcomes for the business. So it's kind of all linked together, and ultimately, if the wrong path is chosen, then we feel that HR it'll limit the impact that HR will have on driving positive business outcomes.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Richard.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Workday will be joining us at the HRD Summit. For more information on speakers, please visit hrdsummit.com.